Where sin has gone must go his grace, the gospel is for all. Say not the heathen are at home, beyond we have no call. For why should we be blessed alone? The gospel is for all. The blessed gospel is for all. The gospel is for all. Where sin has gone must go his grace. The gospel is for all. Receive ye freely, freely give. From every land they call. Unless they hear, they cannot live. The gospel is for all. The blessed gospel is for all. The gospel is for all. Where sin has gone must go his grace. The gospel is for all. Number 249. How precious is the book. How precious is the book divine, by inspiration give, bright as a lamp to his precepts, to guide my soul to heaven. Holy book divine, precious treasure mine, lamp to my feet and a light to my way, to guide me safely home. It sweetly cheers my drooping heart in this dark vale of tears. Light to my life it still imparts and quells my rising fears. Holy book divine, precious treasure mine, lamp to my feet and a light to my way, to guide me safely home. This lamp through all the tedious night of life shall guide my way, till I behold the clearer light of an eternal day. Holy book divine, precious treasure mine, lamp to my feet and a light to my way, to guide me safely home. At this time, we would ask you to bow your head.
17 minutes. And where that came from is this. I have done the Sermon on the Mount as a full sermon, in which I would read it at a good pace, and it takes right at 17 minutes. But in all fairness, I believe the Sermon on the Mount is not the verbatim text of what Jesus preached that day, because it took him all day to do it. Now, I'm not suggesting that I'm going to take all day to preach, but the reality, in all fairness, I think that 17 minutes is just really the condensed version of what Jesus really spoke that day, because, like I say, it took him all day to do it. Anyway, we'll take however long we take, and it's probably going to be more like the 17 minutes. But I just had to throw that out there. I haven't timed things. I don't do things like that. But I generally have a feeling as to where things will be after I've done it enough times. Turn with me, if you will, to Luke chapter 12. Luke chapter 12. I want us to look a few minutes this evening at a parable that I know I've done at least a time or two during the time that I've been here. And I'm not going to apologize that. I'm not going to apologize for repeating lessons, because in a lot of ways there are a lot of things in the Scriptures that we need to be reminded of. This, to me, is always one of those things that I need to be reminded of every 2 or 3 years. And so I try to do that every few years. I don't always do it on Sunday morning, but it's a text that I think is really important, because I'll tell you what, a lot of us fit into the problems that this man had. We get too tied to this world. We get too tied to what we've got going on here and now, and we just kind of look at it and say, well, you know, I'm so wrapped up in what I'm doing Very much like what it says in James, that we're going to go somewhere, we're going to stay there a year and buy and sell and get gain. And it's where the writer of James says that don't you know your life is just a vapor that's here for a short while and it's gone. Very much that kind of idea. And in the parable of the rich fool in Luke chapter 12, verses 13 through 21, this has also always had a soft spot for me in my heart in a way. The very first sermon I gave when I was 14 years old, this is what I preached on, this text. I titled it, The Man Who Had Eye Trouble, and it was not E-Y-E, but it was I, with a capital I. And I think that fits very well. I mean, the idea is, he thought too much of number one. He thought of self. And so I want us to draw on some things, look at this text, we'll draw on some things to get out of this for our time that we spend here this evening together. Luke 12:13. Someone in the crowd said to him, Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. But he said to him, Man, who made me judge or arbiter over you? And he said to them, Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. Now let's stop there for just a bit. Jesus is speaking one day, he's out and about one day, and someone in the crowd kind of corners Jesus in a way and says, Teacher, have my brother divide the inheritance with me. So, where could this be coming from? Well, in the old law, under the old covenant, the oldest son was given the opportunity to be essentially the executor. Okay, they got a double portion of any estate that was given out, but they also were the executor of the father's will, and so they would divide that. Well, apparently, taking things at face value, here is a situation in which a son, an older brother, I guess you would say, is not dividing the inheritance the way that they're supposed to. Well, let's just kind of roll that around a little bit. Jesus does not say anything to the man about the fact that this was false. So I think from when you look at it, I think you got to take it as being true, as being accurate. And what I mean by that is that this man is right on. This situation really does exist. You see, if the man was lying about his situation, Jesus would have called him on it. And so I don't doubt the veracity of his claim. I believe his claim is exactly right. His brother was refusing to share the inheritance with him. Well, let's think. Was it his inheritance? I think acknowledgeably so. That it was very likely something that was owed to him. Something that was supposed to be his. And this was something that was the fair thing, the right thing, would be for the son that was the arbitrator or the executor to rightly divide out the inheritance the way it should be. But you know what? What does Jesus say? Jesus, first of all, says, how did you put me in the place of judge or arbiter? Now, would Jesus have been righteous in his judgment? Yes, of course. He would have been the perfect person to do that, but that's not why Jesus was here. Jesus was not here to be a small claims judge. That's not why he was here on earth. He was here to be the Savior of the world. And so he's pointing out, that's not my role, that's not my job. Also, for him to do such a thing would be outside of the law. That would be something that whatever their law mechanism was, that they would be there to do that. What this man is doing is trying to get Jesus on his side and say, Lord, would you do something about him? And I wonder sometimes if we approach the Bible that way. God, there's got to be a verse for this guy, whatever he's doing. Kind of goes along the lines of what we were talking about some in our Bible class this morning. That a lot of times we're really good at pointing out other people's sin and harping about and telling about and getting them told about their sins, and we're not so good about applying it to ourselves and applying whatever it is that we struggle with or whatever it is that we're focused on. And so Jesus says, I'm not the judge for this situation. I'm not this arbiter that you're looking for. And there would be people in place to do that. But then Jesus flips it on its head. And he says to him, take care that you be on your guard against all covetousness. But you know what? It's owed to him. It's his inheritance. How can it be covetous over something that's rightfully his? Well, see, he says all covetousness. And see, that's where the issue is. In fact, really, when you look at things like jealousy and envy, we use those terms simultaneously, but they're actually not. Jealousy is different from envy in this. Envy is when I want what you have, and jealousy is when I want to keep what I've got. You see, it's how the Bible can say that God is a jealous God. God's not an envious God, but he's a jealous God. God is a jealous God because why? Because it's all his. We are his people. He doesn't divide loyalties with anybody. And so God's a jealous God and did not like the idolatrous actions and worship of the peoples because he wasn't going to divide his time with anybody else. But envy means we want what else somebody else has. Well, that's kind of what's going on here, that this man is covetous, not for what somebody else has, but for what is actually his. His focus, his energy, his effort, what was all-consuming to him was what was owed him. And Jesus is warning him to be careful about this, to be careful in saying one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. So whether you get that inheritance or not, that's not what life is all about. Now, however, if that older brother happened to be standing there, which it almost appears like he was, because I think because it kind of seems like he's, why would he say this if his brother wasn't there? He may have even pointed to his brother. That'd be the way it is. I mean, I could see that happening. Would you please tell my brother to divide inheritance with me? Very well happened, but Jesus wasn't going to step into that. So it's quite possible that not only does the man hear it who is having the inheritance withheld, but it's also quite possible that the elder brother, the one who is withholding, is also listening. Could be. But Jesus is saying, whatever branch, whatever route, whatever direction the covetousness is coming from, beware. Because man's life is not in the abundance of his possessions. That's something we as people struggle with immensely in our society. We struggle with our correct view of possessions. A lot of us like stuff, and we pile stuff, and we chock our closets full of stuff, and our garages full of stuff, and we do all kinds of things with our stuff because we like our stuff, don't we? And then if you don't have enough stuff in your place, and you go out and get a rental unit, and I've done those things before, and I'm not throwing stones at you that I don't have issues with at times too, but don't we do that? We do all those kinds of things. Now I'll tell you, a lot of people don't say good things about millennials, but I'll tell you one good thing about millennials in general: they're not quite so stuff oriented. And that's why there's a log jam of antiques out there, because the younger people aren't really wanting them. They're coming out, and they're millennials now. They're the minimalists. Now we've got some exceptions to that. I know I know we've got a young man back there that's a junk dealer. He likes dealing with the antiques, but he's a rarity. That's a rare thing, and it's a good thing that he does. But as far as our stuff, as generally speaking, we as people, we like our stuff. And it's okay to have things. God's blessed us, and God's blessed many of us with possessions, but never, ever let those possessions own us. We might own possessions, but we can't let them own us. And that's what the problem is with this man in this story. This is the context of the parable. Now we have the parable, verse 16. And he told him this parable, saying, the land of a rich man produced plentifully. And he thought to himself, what shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns, and I'll build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, and drink, and be merry. For God said to him, fool, this night your soul is required of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So it is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. This man's fields produced greatly. He was immensely blessed. So blessed that his barns couldn't hold all of it. Now I want to ask you, what had he done wrong? Had he lied, cheated, stolen? Apparently none of that. You know, we're not told any of those things. The man had done nothing wrong. He was a hard-working farmer who had planted. He'd put forth the effort. He'd worked hard for his labors. He deserved the labors, and he deserved to have a good crop. And there's nothing wrong with what happened. He had produced plentifully, and he'd put forth the effort to get that. And no one is not acknowledging that. The least of which even in Christ is not saying anything against that. He had done nothing wrong. It was all his possessions. And so he was given all of this, and he was blessed in all these ways. But you'll notice, and I even emphasized it many times through there, all the personal pronouns, I, me, my, all those things. And that's why the sermon title, The Man with Eye Trouble. He thought about himself, and he thought about him and all the blessings he had, and how he was going to live it up, how he was going to eat, drink, and be merry. There's a lot of people that hold that as their life motto, eat, drink, and be merry. Boy, I'd be afraid of that one, having known this parable about that as a motto. But he received greatly. He apparently had done nothing wrong. He hadn't done anything evil. He hadn't lied, cheated, or stolen. He had simply been blessed. But what he did was he wrapped up himself in his things so tightly and focused so greatly on what he had. You'll notice he didn't even get to build the barns. He says, you have all these things, and he says, so I have ample goods laid up for many years. He says, I will do this. See, he hasn't even built the barns. He just says, I'm going to build the barns. I'm going to tear down the barns and build bigger ones. Doesn't even get to do that. He just simply says, that's what I'm going to do. And he says, I'm going to eat, drink, and be merry for many years. And so he has these plans about how he's going to spend this huge windfall of crops that have come upon him. There's a lot of things he could have done with this. He could have taken this and given this to the poor. He could have taken this and sold it and then give that to help others. He could have been a blessing to so many people, but instead he focused inward. And when he focused inward, somebody else got everything he had. There's some great life lessons that we should learn, that we should live and do and act the best we can every single day, because what matters is when this life's over, were we rich toward God. You see, he was rich toward these things because his life was all about working hard, doing well, and getting ahead. And working hard and making a good life from yourself is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing at all. In fact, it's a biblical thing. But it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is that we be rich toward God, that we invest in things that are eternal. Here's an important thing. Here's something I want you to chew on, like you to take home with you and take it for this next week and take it with you. Latch on to this, please. What are you doing and what are you involved in that's going to outlast this world? What are you doing? What are you involved in that's going to have eternal benefit? You see, you can build that bigger barn if you get the chance to live long enough to do it. And it's okay if you build big barns, but you know, in the context of the story, if you've got the blessings and you've got those things, but what are you doing that's eternal? You see, what we need to be doing and how we need to be rich toward God is this. We need to invest in our spiritual lives, our spiritual well-beings, the spiritual well-beings of others. You see, the way that we teach our children the Bible, the way that we put Christianity a priority in our home, that might have eternal consequences. You see, but how big your barn is or how well your crops do, it doesn't matter how good a farmer you are when you stand before God on judgment. But it does matter how you've raised your family. It does matter how you've talked to your family members, your neighbors. It does matter what we've done spiritually. And just think about that. You know, we all like the idea of trying to leave our mark in this world. And I think all of us, especially as you get a little older, you kind of think, okay, what have I been known for? What would people take from my life? What will they remember about me? What will be my legacy? Would it be you had the biggest barn in the county? Or will it be, you know, the legacy of faith that you leave in your family, in your friends, in your neighborhood, the people on your block, the people that you knew? Would it be the integrity that you showed, the way that you're generous and the way that you help other people? Will it be those kinds of things? You see, because those things bring about eternal things. And so what are you doing that matters? What are you doing that matters eternally? You see, eternal things matter because they're going to last a lot longer than any of that stuff we have, any of the barns we build, or whatever it is we do here on this earth. What matters that lasts forever? You see, back into that text, Jesus ends it. This is the punchline. So this is how it is for someone that lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. What kind of riches do we have before God? What kind of riches are we laying up before God? What eternal things are we doing? That's what we need to ask ourselves, and that's what it is we need to focus on. So I want to challenge you to think about what it is that you're doing that will last forever. You see, we can build a road, or we can build whatever, but it won't last forever. But people being in eternity with God, that's a forever thing. You want to have an impact forever? Then do those things that are spiritual. Do those things that are rich, make us rich toward God. There was not one single person here, or the two individuals, the man who asked to have his brother deal with him, and then the rich man. These individuals hadn't really done anything wrong. These were good people, apparently. They hadn't cheated anybody, they hadn't lied or anything. But yet, what was their great sin? They weren't focused on eternal matters. They were focused on physical, earthly things. And I'm afraid I know a lot of people, family, friends, neighbors, etc., that fit that category. They're greatly blessed. They're wonderful people. But they're lost because of they're not rich toward God. They're rich in a lot of ways, but they're not rich toward God. Don't let us ever be guilty of that. And let's try to help other people notice what really matters most. If you are not a Christian, we want to give you the opportunity tonight to come and give your life to Christ, to become a child of His. You know, the thing about being rich toward God, you know, we think about what we might have to give up or what we might do in this world. But I can tell you what, you can't give up enough to be a millionth of whatever God's going to give you. You know, you can't parse those numbers, but let's face it. You can't even get in the same neighborhood. You know, God is going to outgive you. And you've heard me say this before. No matter what you do in this life, how long is it going to take staring at the throne of God before you feel paid back? You know, when you are before the throne of God as a child of God, how long are you going to have to stare at that throne before you realize that it was a good idea to be a Christian? How hot's it going to have to get for you to realize it was a bad idea to pass up on the invitation? Not going to take long, is it? It's not going to take long till we forget whatever difficulty, whatever challenge we have in this world in eternity. Let's all do what we can to be rich toward God. If you have a need to give your life to Christ or to come for prayers, come while we stand and sing.
Why do you wait, dear brother? Oh, why do you tarry so long? Your Savior is waiting to give you a place in His sanctified throne. Why not? Why not? Him now. Why not? Why not? Why not come to Him now? What do you hope, dear brother? There's no other Savior but Jesus. There's no other way but His way. Why not? Why not? Why not come to Him now? Why not? Why not? Why not come to Him now? Why do you wait, dear brother? The harvest is passing away. Your Savior is longing to bless you. There's danger and death and delay. Why not? Why not? Why not come to Him now? Why not? Why not? Why not come to Him now?